Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey, welcome back to the MSL 411. We've got a great episode for you today that we've decided to title Fit for the ATS. Lots of talk about what that is, why you should have this on your radar if you're applying directly to companies, and some practical tips directly from the source, from the two biggest sources that we see, with being Greenhouse and the Workday systems and job portals that our clients tend to use. We've got a lot of good content for you today, so we're excited to go ahead and kick that off and really do a deep dive into this topic that a lot of people feel a lot of frustration with, wondering if their resume is not making it through the ATS system and if that's why they're not getting the feedback or the interest that they are hoping for. So before we kind of jump into this topic, the mission of MSL 411 is to provide resources to you guys that are geared at folks that are applying directly to the company. This is different than if you're going through a recruiter. So just wanted to preface the conversation with that. But before we get into it, Linda, can you define what an ATS is? And, help our listeners understand why this matters.
Yeah, I think ATS is a term that people hear thrown around a lot, maybe not fully understand what that means. Of course, ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System, and sometimes we as recruiters refer to it as the portal. So we're entering a candidate into the portal. It's basically the system that takes your CV after you've submitted it online for a position through LinkedIn or through the company website. It goes to that company through their applicant tracking system, and it kind of searches the resume, the document, for keywords, key phrases, things of that nature to kind of highlight that this person is a match for the position. And so basically the ATS is the middleman from when you submit your resume online to when it shows up in the hiring manager's hands. And it, like I said, it kind of takes that information, breaks it down, and translates it over. So you really want to make sure that the way your resume is set up, the way you have it formatted, and all of those things is something that's going to be compatible with the ATS system.
Absolutely. And I think some people might think, well, if I'm doing a PDF, it'll all be fine because it's not being jumbled up depending on the version of the person who's receiving, let's say, a Word doc, where somebody might have this version, somebody might have this version. When you open it on this version, it's all jumbled up. Mm-hmm. Does it matter?
Yeah. There's a couple of different ways a PDF can even go wrong for you. So it could be problems with the file size. It could be too small or too big. So that way the information isn't making it across exactly the way you had hoped, or exactly the way it looks on your end is not how it's going to show up on the hiring manager's end. Mm-hmm. There could be some reasons why it shows up jumbled or messy. There's a lot of things that play into that, whether it's a PDF or a Word doc, a lot of things that play into it that could have it show up on the other side of the ATS kind of chewed up and spit out, basically. So besides the file size being a factor, you could have problems if you have any kind of graphics or photos or word art on your resume. Now, we don't too often see word art, but it has happened. A lot of people do use graphics and inserted pictures, maybe not a photograph, but I've seen
an icon.
Yes, yeah. Things just like that, like using the LinkedIn icons, the contact me little icons and logos. Also, I've seen plenty of resumes where they have maybe a horizontal line kind of separating the sections. And when I go in and kind of mess around with it or click on things, I see that line is an inserted drawing of a line. There's other ways to include those lines. If you need help on that, that's where your recruiter can come in handy, and please let us know if you do have questions on that. But any kind of inserted images like that, like lines, arrows, icons, circles, anything like that is not going to allow your information to come across the way it looks right in front of your eyes on your computer or printed out. So you want to be very careful of that. Resumes that are uploaded as an image rather than a Word doc or a PDF, those might not translate well through the ATS system either. So it might not come through laid out exactly the way you intended. And so it could be jumbled, words printed over other words, words out of place, sentence is not cohesive. If you've used a column setup or something like that, I will say that when people do use the column layouts, that's going to be an issue because ATS is not the most advanced system in the world. Most companies use them, but they're not super advanced. So they do read left to right. So if you've got columns, you can see where reading left to right over 2 or 3 columns is it's gonna not read well.
Yeah.
So your hiring manager is gonna get that, and from sentence to sentence, it's not gonna make much sense. So you want to be careful of that. Another problem I see is when people use complex things like tables or headers and footers. If you use a table or a text box, oftentimes that information that's in that text box is not going to come across. So that information will be blank. All the information that you put in there that's important, that's vital, it's not going to come across at all. Headers and footers, same thing. If you are someone who has your name and contact information in a header instead of at the top of your actual document, that header doesn't read. It doesn't come across. Any information you put in there does not translate through to the other side. So if your name and your contact information is in a header instead of the document itself, the hiring manager is going to end up with a nameless, phone numberless CV, which they may be super excited about the work experience and the educational background and all of that they're reading, but who does it belong to? They don't really know. So you don't want that to be a case. You don't want that to be what keeps you from getting the job. Another thing that is news to me, that resumes that have incomplete job titles might cause you some problems too. We're going to talk a little bit more about how ATS systems pick up on words, and they are kind of programmed to identify certain keywords and key phrases. So if you are abbreviating a senior director title that you've held and putting SR period, DIR period, or abbreviating the word executive in executive MSL to EXEC period, something like that, just to save space on a long line of information, it's not going to pick up on that. And so that wonderful title that you worked so hard for and spent all that time to attain and are very proud of, rightly so, is not going to come through. And so the hiring manager is not going to see that that is a title that you held. So those are just a couple of examples of things that you want to be careful for. And using Greenhouse as an example, those are some problems they run into often that causes a resume to get kicked out of their system and not make it to the hiring manager, or make it to the hiring manager, but they can't really read it. They have to do a little bit of work to figure out what's going to go on. So they're going to put that resume aside and come back to it later and then forget about it and fall in love with somebody else in the meantime. So definitely want to make sure that your CV is compatible for the ATS. It's fit for the ATS, title of our episode, and that it's going to come across the way you intend your information to come across to the other side.
Yes, absolutely. And, keep in mind, you don't want to create more work for the talent acquisition person. If your resume is in great shape, it translates well into the ATS system, they're not having to go dig to find for information and download this and do this. That is going to go differently than somebody whose information requires a lot of work to sort through and process. So, don't make them work too hard. That's not their job. And so, that's absolutely a great point. And these are some of the tips that we pulled directly from Greenhouse's website too, of areas where their system may have trouble parsing the information. So this is direct from the source, the things that Greenhouse specifically has trouble with. And our hope is that by providing you guys some of these examples may trigger something of, maybe I should change this on the resume. Maybe this is something that this particular system is not getting through. And as we, grow in this era of machine learning and AI, and these technologies become more advanced, maybe we'll be able to handle this better. But for where we stand currently, these are some of the issues where that technology has trouble parsing the content, parsing the information. And so we got to do the best with what we've got right now.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people turn to resume templates out there, and some of them are so beautiful and they look really nice. But when you really break it down and look at it, they have sections that maybe are not needed, or they format them a little differently. So a lot of resumes that I see that come from the templates have a section that's bulleted out for skills and proficiencies. Is that something that's needed in your opinion, or what are your thoughts on having a section for key achievements or core competencies in this day and age, a section that kind of outlines that for the hiring manager?
Yeah, I don't love them. I kind of tend to skip over them when I'm looking at a resume because they're kind of generic. They don't really give specific information. And generally it's repetitive of something that is already in the resume. And so that's where I would say, well, leave it off if that information is already there. But what I wanted to talk about in this episode is making sure that the information is in fact there. And the reason why is because applicant tracking systems like Greenhouse, like Workday, these systems are looking for keywords that match the objectives of the roles that they're recruiting for against the skills a company deems valuable. This is sometimes referred to, I know Workday calls it this, as a skills minor. Mine, like in a mine, just to clarify. But if you're not going to have a skills section, you need to be sure that you have this information in the body of your experience, because these machine learning technologies and AI are looking for that information to match what's on the job listing and what that talent authority has deemed is a requirement. And so, just as an example, the skills miner feature in Workday enables companies to mine skills and expertise from multiple sources. So this can be both structured and unstructured content, things like resumes, job applications, job requisitions, feedback, and profiles. So it is they're taking this technology to create a real-time skills inventory of what they have as far as the applicant pool. But you have to remember that these systems are also being used for the current employees that they already have. And so they're taking an inventory of the skills that they already have within their organization to look for deficits. We talk with our candidates about how they want opportunities for growth and skill development and training and all of these things within their organization. Well, organizations are able to use systems like Workday to say, this is the skills database of what we have. Here are some deficiencies we've identified. Let's work on developing training programs or skill set trainings to bring these people up to speed in this area. See where our deficiencies are, offer solutions to keep employees retained and engaged. They're using these systems too. So even if you're not maybe necessarily looking for a new opportunity at the moment, you're listening to this episode, tuning into this episode, and you work at a company. I've heard of a few big pharmas that do this, where they ask every year for an updated resume or periodically for an updated resume from their candidates. Part of what they could be looking for here is to do a skills inventory. So even if you're not actively looking, keep in mind that your company is using this data in a way that you may not necessarily see or understand. And having that information is important beyond just the application stage. So I thought that was really good information to share, because I think it's something that people don't always know, because they don't know how these systems work or what they're for the internal functions.
Yeah, I know that's something I didn't know they were doing. So that's news to me.
Yeah, well, as far as the skills demand that talent acquisition and hiring managers are talking about, Workday and these programs, they let you capture skills based on the job requisites, the skills of comparable employees, other MSLs on the team, let's say, the opportunities and projects that they might be looking for. So maybe it's beyond the MSL role, maybe it's somebody who's at a director level position. There's all kinds of different keywords that they can plug and play here, and different functions that they can use to search for those keywords. So I thought it would be helpful for you to give our listeners a couple of examples of what are kind of the main categories in a greenhouse that someone is searching for.
Yeah, so like you said, Greenhouse allows the hiring managers to search for candidates by keywords. It looks for certain keywords. And those could be things related to your job title. It could be your skills that you've mentioned throughout your resume. It could be your experience, years of experience, level of experience. It could be your educational background. It could be a number of other qualifications that they're looking for this particular job. And depending on how they set up the search, they can look for either preferred skills for this position or required skills for this position. So that could be things like your location. If they're looking for a certain geography, they might be looking for people who live in specific states. And so they can narrow down the candidate pool that way. They could be looking for your therapeutic area. They could be looking for other keywords, like if they have a disorder that they're working on that involves seizures, they might look for epilepsy experience, seizure disorder experience, or if their team supports a medication that's an injectable, and it would be beneficial to have somebody on the team that has that experience working with another injectable, or working with a tick inhibitor, and they'd like to have someone who's worked with tick inhibitors before. Anything like that might be applicable to this position. And so having those keywords in there that the system can pull out and kind of allow your resume to rise to the top of the stack for that hiring manager is just going to be very helpful. So A, you want to make sure you have all those keywords in there. And then B, you want to make sure your resume is formatted to where that reads the way you want it to. So it actually does what it's supposed to do and stands out to the ATS system and to the hiring manager. So just kind of a little side note there, just to make sure you're reading the job description and understanding the job that you're applying for, the disease state, all of that. If there's anything you've done that's maybe not a dead-on fit, like they're working in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Well, I've never worked in that, but I have neuro experience and I've worked in something similar that affects this population over here. It might be good to put that in there. If they're working in a rare pediatric disease and you've not worked in that disease, but you've worked in pediatrics before, that KOL pool, those might be good keywords to slip in there. So just kind of a good little aside.
This is so important because you're really taking the opportunity to use the job description, use the information that the company has provided for you, and turning that into the content that is featured on your resume. So when we talk about things like specific experiences, specific keywords, maybe it, when you mention an example about Duchenne's, generally we're not going to see a company have a job description saying must have 3 years of experience in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. But if you have neuro listed specifically in the resume, they're going to pick that up. And on the topic, making sure that you have the months and the years is going to translate best into the ATS system as well. Because if they're filtering for the years of experience and you have 21 to 22 listed, that's not really going to populate the years of experience that you have. So, really take a close look at that job description. Look and see what are the skills that they're clearly trying to source for based on this job description, and make sure those things are visible in your resume, whether it's the years of experience, whether it is the therapeutic area experience. Maybe they've specifically listed that they want people experienced in clinical trials, things like that. What are those skill sets that you can tell from the job description are clearly very important to them, and make sure those things are included in your resume. It will only serve you well to have those in there if that's the keyword that they decide to search for. And, you're probably talking about it anyway. If you're not, you should. So be sure that those things are in there. Your job description for the position you're applying for is the best aid to help you understand, what it is that they're looking for.
Absolutely. Good point. While we're talking about this, and you kind of mentioned this at the beginning, that all of this is geared toward those of you who are submitting your resumes online or through the company website or through LinkedIn, and not necessarily going through a recruiter. But I do want to mention that when you're using a recruiter, it means that you're not really at the mercy quite so much of these ATS systems. Now, I will say that when we enter our candidates and submit them to one of our clients, we are still entering their information into the portal or into the ATS system, but we also have that added benefit of having the relationship with the hiring manager. That way, if something does cause your resume to come through kind of jumbled or not quite as legible, not quite as much as you anticipated it to look for the hiring manager, they may come back to us and say, well, I can't really tell what this is supposed to say, or can you explain what they mean by this? So we have a chance to kind of cross that gap and explain, or just bypass it all and say, hey, look, I know that came through a little weird, but I'm telling you, you want to talk to this guy. They've got this experience here, that they've done this. They're going to be fantastic. Their personality is great. They're going to fit with your team because we know them also. So you want to make sure that when you work with a recruiter, that they, first of all, are actually working on the position and not just fishing for your resume. We hear that more and more these days, and it's sadly the case with some recruiters, but you want to make sure that your recruiter is actually working the position, meaning they have a relationship with that hiring manager so that they can bridge that gap for you and kind of mitigate all the problems that you might encounter with the ATS system. So I hope that these have just been some really helpful tips and things to remember when you're putting together your resume, when you're looking for those jobs to apply for, and when you're looking at putting skills into your resume. Where do I put them? Do I put them in their own section? Do I scatter them in my job description? We hope this has kind of been helpful to answer a few of those questions for you and give you a little peek behind the curtain as to what goes on after you click submit. I will say that, spelling out your experience, spelling out exactly what you've done and how it's going to be applicable to this job is always going to be your best bet. So give details. But if you do have questions about resume formatting and making sure that your resume is compatible for ATS, feel free to reach out. We have several resources for you there. We even have resume templates that we've created that we know 100% are ATS friendly. And so if you're not sure or you're just getting started and need some help with your resume, reach out to us. We're happy to help. That's a resource that we love to provide, and we do so for free. And so we want to make sure that everybody has the best chance of getting their dream jobs. But check with us and see how we can help you there, or just check with us and see if we're working with a company you're interested in before you apply online and go blindly into the ATS system. See if there's a recruiter connection there that can help you out. So we're here for that as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We hope this has been super helpful, and feel free to check back. We're going to have another great episode coming to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.